I don't want to say that my best years are behind me, but I had a great run in the game. Now, a big part of my life is to help other people chase their dream.
1994 training camp with Green Bay. I heard a story that you got so nervous that you could not call a play.
Wasn't so much nervous and not being able to call a play. It was more telling myself, if you fail, it's game over. I often tell young quarterbacks that if you want to play this position, great. You've got to be willing to be the reason your team wins and loses.
For young athletes facing setbacks, what practical advice would you give them based on your own journey?
I think the biggest piece of advice I would give is
1994 Kurt was way different than 1998 Kurt Warner.
No doubt.
Do you think today people are not getting time to work out their inefficiencies?
Yeah, we've lost our patience with the idea that greatness takes time.
Do you think players today are afraid to ask for help?
Yeah, one of the hardest things to do is to admit that you're wrong. When the expectations are high on you, it's even harder.
What are some less obvious reasons you achieve success in the NFL?
One thing is that
thank you so much for joining me. Welcome to the show. Man, this is incredible. So thank you for joining me.
You got it. Thanks for having me on. I'm glad you reached out. You never know how you connect with people in life. I love social media and the platform and the ability to be able to connect to people. So I'm glad somehow, some way, was able to see your tweet and we were able to get hooked up.
You know, and I saw that you started following me, and I wanted to make sure it wasn't the Rams running back Kurt Warner or the Penn State. I was like, is this? And I know he spells it with a C. But yes. You know what's funny? I can remember when you burst into the scene, 98 or whatever. I can remember watching the ESPN stats back when, you know, the Sunday Countdown would have all the shows and all that. And they spelled your name with the C when they were showing like the passing yardage and all that stuff. But hey, first and foremost, again, just thanks for joining the show and happy early birthday. I know your birthday's coming up and it's the same day as my nephew's. That's how I know that.
Okay. Gotcha. Yes. June's a big month. My granddaughter, my wife, myself, you know, my daughter-in-law. So we got a big stretch here coming up in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. So what do you go by with are you like Papa Kurt or Grandpa or what's your?
I am Poppy. So okay. My wife just said, there's no way I'm old enough to be a grandma. So so she came up with some names early on. So we are Poppy and Cha-Cha. And so that's what we've instilled in the grandkids so that it's not grandma and grandpa. We just we don't want to feel like we're that old yet, even though we are.
Are you already telling the grandkids stories? Like, you know, back in my day, you know, I was the guy, or I was the best.
They're a little too young for that. And so I'm sure that will come, you know, as they grow up. And right now we're still pretty cool just being Poppy and Cha-Cha. So we don't have to try to embellish any stories to make ourselves cooler. But no doubt, 7 and 6 right now. So there's no doubt that it's coming, that they're going to outgrow Poppy and Cha-Cha and go, okay, why do I want to spend time with them? So we're going to have to make ourselves pretty cool at some point.
Actually, before we move further, it's really important to me that, you know, you're actually my second favorite quarterback of all time. And I hope you ask me who my first one is.
I will ask you who your first is.
It's a tie. It's a tie. It's actually really my third favorite, I guess. Uncle Rico from Napoleon Dynamite, obviously. Like,
well, who doesn't love Uncle Rico?
Who doesn't Uncle Rico? And I feel
we could throw it over the mountain, man. Come on.
And then Paul Crewe. Whether it's the Burt Reynolds or Adam Sandler version, pick your poison.
Okay, gotcha. All right. Well, I'll take third place to those guys.
No, in all seriousness, you are my favorite quarterback of all time, and we were talking about.
Thank you.
Yeah, and the reason why I mentioned I'm active duty military, and like most people, I've been on deployments or work like shift work and just hanging out with friends, and it always comes up because we're all the best NFL. We could all be NFL GMs, right?
Yeah.
But we always talk about, man, if you could start your franchise, and everyone talks about their favorite quarterback. And there was just something about you that just always, you and Drew Brees specifically were my two favorite quarterbacks of all time. And there's just a belief and such inspiration in your story. And we'll get into that. But man, I've just been a massive fan. Even when you were in New York did you play with the Giants for a season or 2 seasons?
Yeah, just for a season. Yeah. Just for
And I remember that because it was Eli's rookie year, and I think you were the starter, and I think you guys were like 5-4 or something like that, and you were having a good run, but you just like, hey, the only way this guy's going to grow is if we throw him to the fire.
Yep. Yeah. You know, I mean, life throws different experiences at you, and obviously I've had a crazy journey from that football perspective, but you know, you were just talking when you threw out that quote early on. It's you know, we don't grow in spite of the storms. We grow because of them. Mm-hmm. And I fully agree with that. Is that I've dealt with some storms in my journey. And every one of them has taught me a different lesson, has pushed me a different direction, has shown me something about myself that I needed to change or that I needed to hone and get better at. And so, oftentimes, and I know a lot of my journey, I wanted to avoid the storms, right? You want to be, the guy that gets, a scholarship from a huge school and you start for 4 years and you get drafted number one and you have all that sounds great. But most of us have to deal with the storms, and it's those things that really shape who we are. And so, although it's been a long journey, and I went some places that I didn't want to go at the time, I'm grateful for each and every one of them.
Awesome. Speaking of life, why is life great right now?
Why is life great right now? Because I feel like, I'm doing retirement the right way. Fortunate to, play a sport and to have the success that I did so I could retire at a younger age. But, retirement, I think, is a relative term. And for me, I think retirement should be about doing the things that you're passionate about and having the freedom to be able to do the things that you want to do along the way. And that to me is why life is great right now, because I've got a lot of jobs. My wife tells me I've got too many jobs and I'm too busy. But every one of my jobs is something that I choose to do and that I love doing. And then I have the freedom to be able to do other things, whether that's this off time to be able to travel with my wife, which is a passion of hers and something she's always wanted to do. And so I can leave for 3 and 4 weeks to travel with her. I've got 7 kids, and all of my kids are out of the house now. They're all, in college or beyond. And so the freedom to be able to go see them and do different things with them. And, so that to me is where it really starts, is that I love everything that I'm doing. There's not something that I feel like I'm forced to do at this stage in my life, that I get to choose what I want to do. And that to me is what retirement should be. It's the freedom to choose the things that you want to do. And so that's awesome. And then I just, I'm in a really good place. And, whether that's in my marriage with my wife or just, with our kids, being able to watch our kids and have a relationship with our kids and be able to watch them spread their wings and do their thing. All of them are different. All of them are chasing different things. But it's a cool stage, is that, we're at that place now where each of them get to kind of branch out and start to get into adulting and start to figure out what life looks like and what their dreams are going to be and where they want to go and how they're going to pursue it. And that's just really a fun stage, especially because, I don't want to say that my best years are behind me, because I still hope that there's things I'm going to do to impact people, but I had a great run, in the game and to do the things that I did. And so now I think a big part of my life is being able to help those around me, being able to help other people chase their dream. And it's something I'm passionate about, whether it's those in my family or whether it's those that are budding quarterbacks or just people chasing life like I had to chase life and go through some of those challenges. It's just all of those things makes it a really, really fun stage for me right now. And so I'm enjoying every bit of life.
That's awesome. And I'm in the same boat. We talked about me just retiring from the military and just kind of pursuing passions. And Nate Boyer was on my podcast earlier this week. And then I was like, I booked this one. I was like, man, this is crazy. Like Kurt Warner's going to be on. I want to ask you, is there anything that's on the front of your mind that where you woke up this morning, there was something immediately on the forefront of your mind?
Again, I would say I'm still very passionate about the game of football. Yeah. So that's something that, kind of wakes me up and drives me every day, is that I just feel like it's, one of my gifts to be able to kind of give back and share my expertise. And so I'm always thinking and trying to be innovative on ways to connect with different people to share, my journey, to share what I can football wise, whether it's young quarterbacks or, coaches. I created my own teaching website. I do a lot of stuff on social media. A lot of breakdowns, obviously doing the stuff with the NFL. So that's always on my mind. Like, okay, how can I continue to kind of shape myself to help in that area? I've also, we've got our oldest son, who's 36 now, but suffered a traumatic brain injury when he was 4 months old. And so we've created a home for Zach and those like Zach and families like ours that have a child with intellectual developmental disabilities, can't live a fully independent life, but are very high functioning and have the ability to chase their purpose. So it's a place called Treasure House. And so we've built the first one, and we're just in the process of trying to hone our model down, whether that's the programming piece of it or the financial piece. because we have a desire to build treasure houses all over the country and all over the world to try to fulfill that need for families like ours and young men and women like Zach, so they can step into their purpose and they can chase their dreams, even though their dreams may look different than our other 6 kids. So that's a real passion of mine. So I wake up almost every day going, okay, how do we do this? How do we find this sustainable piece so we can kind of just take off and really allow every family to have the opportunity that we have with Treasure House? And then I think the third thing is, what I just mentioned is just, I wake up every day going, okay, how can I help my kids reach their full potential? How can I push them, to be able to, kind of take their game to another level, and present them with opportunities. And then when the opportunities come, help them to be prepared to, take those opportunities and grab a hold of them and hopefully fulfill their dream like I was able to.
That is perfect. And that leads to something I wanted to ask you about. You talked about just sharing expertise and mentoring. And I want to take a trip or start with a trip down memory lane, just going back to 1994 when you were in training camp with Green Bay as a 4th string quarterback. And I heard a story that you finally get a shot to practice or take some snaps, but you got so nervous that you could not call a play. If you could travel back in time into that exact moment, what 3-word message would you pass on to that version of Kurt Warner?
I think the best 3 words is good. I would probably add a couple more, but
sure.
Don't be afraid to fail. So I guess we got 4 there. Don't be afraid to fail. I think that was really that moment for me. Wasn't so much nervous and not being able to call a play. It was more not wanting to go in, because I was telling myself in my mind, if you go in and fail, it's game over and you're never going to get another shot and you're going to get cut. And little did I know, as I was going through that, the actual flip side was happening, is that the coaches were looking at me and going, this guy's afraid to go in and practice and fail. There's no chance this guy's making the team. There's no chance we're putting the ball in his hands on a Sunday afternoon if he's afraid to fail in practice. If he's afraid to throw himself to the wolves in practice. And so that's what I would say is, failure is what shapes so much of our lives. And especially, I think sports is a great safe way to say that, right? I mean, in sports, you fail, you lose a game, you throw an interception or whatever it is. So it's a safe way to learn. Yeah, but it was in throwing that interception that I learned what I could or couldn't do, or I learned why that was an interception and what I could have done differently to prevent that. So next time I'm growing and learning and getting better all the time. But, my mindset was, I don't want to fail. I don't want to fail. I don't want to fail. So it was trying to protect myself from any type of failure. And in doing that, it led to me getting cut. And again, not that I was going to make the team anyways, but got cut. I had to work in a grocery store, play arena football. Like, again, I don't know if I would have made it and been in the NFL longer and whatever, but it was a moment that shaped me just from the standpoint that, I was always a very confident person. But there was that moment where, I'm at a new level and I wasn't really sure. I wanted to believe I was good enough, but I wasn't really sure. And I allowed that fear to creep in and kind of take over that confidence and say, oh, you're going to walk in fear more than you're going to walk in confidence. I don't know if you've seen the movie. You're a little younger than I am, but the movie Caddyshack.
Of course, yeah.
Or no, I'm sorry, Animal House.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Where's the angel and the devil on the guy's shoulders, and telling him what to do and what not to do, and going back and forth with them. And I think oftentimes in life, that's what we do. We find ourselves in situations, and we've got the angel on one side saying, "Oh, you can do this, go in there," and then you got the devil on the other side, like, "Hey, you go in there, you're going to fail, and you're not going to be," and we have to wrestle back and forth between those two voices. The ability to be able to push out that negative voice and be able to walk, towards the positive and believe, and even knowing that, hey, even if I fail, I am going to grow through this failure. So I'm not afraid to put myself in a situation to fail. I often tell young quarterbacks that I work with that if you want to play this position and you want to be great, you've got to be willing to be the reason. And that means the reason that your team wins. So you've got to be able to say, put the ball in my hands. I believe I can make the play, or I will make the play in the key moment to win. But you've also got to be able to say, put the ball in my hands. And if we lose, I can handle what comes with losing. I will be the figurehead for that. And I want the ball in my hands to determine whether we're going to win or lose. But you have to be willing to be the reason that your team wins and loses. And that's what greatness is all about. And so it was a great moment for me to learn, the importance of failure in life. And what we do with failure goes a long way in determining how successful we can ultimately be.
I actually want to dive a little bit deeper into this because, I wrote a note to myself that you often emphasize the importance of perseverance and preparation for young athletes today facing rejection. And this is more than just athletes. I mean, this applies to people at all areas of life, or industries. But yeah, for young athletes or anyone facing rejection or setbacks today, what practical advice would you give them based on your own journey?
I think, when it comes to setbacks or, different things that we face or challenges that we face, I think the biggest piece of advice I would give is make sure that the first thing you do when you deal with a setback or a failure or whatever that is look internally, not externally. I think a natural thing for us to do is to point fingers at something that's outside of ourselves and say, well, the reason I failed was because this person didn't recognize my talent, or they put me in a tough situation, or blah, 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 whatever happened. And we want to point the finger elsewhere. One thing that I think I learned in my journey is that I always wanted to look internally first. And I always wanted to look at my ownership in any failure as the very first thing and the most important thing is, okay, we didn't win this game. What did I do, or what didn't I do to help, my team, or to allow me to be the best version of myself? And that doesn't mean you can't, just looking at a football game, doesn't mean you don't give credit to another team, because after you scrutinize and look at yourself and you say, you know what, there's not a whole lot I would have done different. I tip my cap to the other side because they played great, or they made a great play, or they did this, or they did that. To me, it was always about looking at things internally and saying, okay, I got cut from Green Bay. I'm working in a grocery store. Why? What is it that I haven't shown people, that I haven't done, or that I'm not good enough at right now, that I need to improve on? So if I get another shot, I can be ready and I can be successful. And that, to me, is the biggest piece of advice I would give everybody. When failure comes, don't look to pass blame first thing. Look to take the blame and to take ownership and be realistic with yourself on, where are you? Where did I mess that up? Where could I have been better? How can I improve as an individual so the next time around when this happens, I don't make that same mistake again? That was something that I tried to do and tried to apply in the different steps that I took, instead of the opposite. It's funny, I work with a guy on my show on NFL Network on game day morning every Sunday, Steve Mariucci. And he was actually the quarterback coach at Green Bay when I was there in 1994. And so, all the time we have fun with him. And it's like, you cut me. Like, you cut a Hall of Fame quarterback, Mooch. What do you know about quarterbacks? And, we have a lot of fun with it and joking around. But, I remember like the first time I said that to him, and his automatic response was, no, you cut you. And it's so true. Like, again, we have fun on the show where I try to blame Mooch, but he's so right. Moments like we just talked about, that's why I got cut. Those were the things that led to me getting cut. And so when he says you cut you, he's 100% right, that it was about me, and it was about what I didn't do, or how I wasn't prepared, or how I lost confidence in a moment and how that affected my performance. Those were the things that got me cut. And again, I just think it's an illustration of how important it is to be realistic, to be able to have a realistic viewpoint of who we are, what we do well, and maybe where we fall short and where we need to get better. So we're not always just pointing the finger and pointing the blame at somewhere else, because when we do that, that's what stops us from growth. That's what stops us from becoming the best version of ourselves that we can be. When we just say, hey, I was fine, I was perfect, it was everybody else, now we're just going to be stuck in sand and we're not going to be going anywhere.
I love just the mindset that you have. It actually makes me think of Kobe Bryant because I'm a huge basketball fan too.
Yeah.
And there was a famous series early in his career. It was a playoff game against the Jazz. This is the Stockton Malone Jazz where he airballed multiple shots in a playoff game, and Utah ended up just running the young Lakers out the gym. And I think I read or heard over, it's a somewhat famous story, and they were playing in Utah, but when they got back to LA that night, he went to whatever basketball gym, high school basketball gym that he used to, and like at midnight, and was just putting in work, and of course he went on to have a more successful career, which leads to kind of your point that you have to be prepared to meet the opportunity, because 1994 Kurt was way different than 1998 Kurt Warner, right, in terms of mentality and pressure,
No doubt,
or in preparation. But do you think that's whether I keep, whether it's athletes or just for young leaders, do you think that's impacting people's development today, is the fact that we don't give people time to, we talked about before we started recording, like your season in New York, or just like players or people are not getting time to work out their inefficiencies?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think sports, or, the NFL is a great microcosm of what life is all about.
Agreed.
And you're right. We expect players to come in and be a finished product right off the bat. When they're making a leap up and they're playing against better talent and they're playing against them in a more complex situation, and they're 20, 21, 22 years old, and we expect them to be finished products. And, we've lost our patience with the idea that, hey, greatness takes time. Not every great player shows up, year one and is great and win championships and do all of that stuff, that it takes time to grow and season, and it takes experience that, again, I can't get acclimated to the NFL game until I play the NFL game, till I understand the speed and the complexity, and I understand what I'm capable of doing. And, maybe I grow in certain skills that I didn't need in college, but now I need in the NFL. And so it takes time to develop those things. And so, yes, I think, life, for whatever reason, we're trying to force people to have to know and be way sooner than we had to know and be.
Yeah.
Because we had patience with people going, hey, we're going to give you a shot, and we're going to grow you along, and we're going to put you on the practice squad, or you're going to be the backup, and you're going to get time to acclimate to this, so that when your time comes, then we know you're ready, instead of just throwing you out there and assuming you're ready. I think a great example is, just recently there was, the article about, or the book that was written in regards to Caleb Williams. And there were some, quotes that were being thrown around of Caleb, kind of going, hey, they didn't even tell me what to watch on film. They didn't tell me what to do, and I think that's a great cautionary tale for all of us, is that, I think there was a couple things at play there. There was the one side, the coaches, just assuming, hey, this guy has been great in college, and we drafted him number 1 overall, and he sounded really good in all of our interviews. So we just assumed that he knew it all. He knew what he needed. He knew how to prepare. He knew how to watch film. And so, boom, we're going to let him be, because it's worked really well to this point. You go be you, and, get ready to go however you get ready to go, and we'll play. And so for the first side, it was the coaches just assuming whatever they did about Caleb Williams, where they didn't take him and teach him and really bring him along and grow him, in the areas that he needed. And then there was the other side, that's Caleb Williams, that you come out and make these quotes after the fact. I can't believe that if you went into your building and your coaches and say, hey, I've never really had to dive in and watch film. Can you help me with this? Can you show me? Can you talk me through your process? Or, him reach out to me, or Tom Brady, I think he's got a relationship, and just say, hey, take me through your process. While I'm trying to figure out mine, take me through yours, so at least I have a blueprint on where to start. And so, again, I think it's twofold. I think it's us expecting too many people to be more advanced and assuming that they know things or should know things that they've never been taught. And then the other side, like I said, not taking the accountability personally to say, okay, I know I don't know this. I need to find the answer. And I need to humble myself to say, I don't know, coaches. I don't know, blah, and seek out those answers. So again, if I know I'm not ready, I need to figure out how to get ready because the organization or the situation that I'm in, the team that I'm on, is expecting me to be ready and to live up to some certain standard. And so I think it falls on both sides. But I think you're 100% right, is that, for whatever reason, we're expecting, kids to be more grown than they used to be, than they had to be before. And our expectations are so much higher on them. And I'm sure there's part of it because they have access to so much more and all of that stuff. But still, to me, it's like there always has to be room for a learning curve for guys that are new to a situation, right? If I was taking Kurt Warner from the Rams to the Cardinals, okay, I'm going to expect Kurt Warner to be seasoned and ready to go as a Cardinal because he's spent time and done it at a high level and obviously done this before. Boom. If I'm taking Caleb Williams from college and I'm moving him up a level and I'm moving him up complexity and I'm moving him up in a lot of different areas, I need to say, okay, I know there is going to be a transition period here, just like there was, I'm sure, for every coach that was out there. They didn't just jump into the coaching role and go, oh, I got this. I know everything. I've never had to learn it. No, you grow into becoming better. And so I think it's so important for us to be able to, again, nothing wrong with having high expectations, but we also need to know those expectations. We've got to leave room to reach those expectations if they're not there right away, because we have to just believe that, as you take every step and you move to the next place, there is things you're going to have to learn and areas you're going to have to grow in before you reach what we might call your ceiling or your full potential.
Do you think players today they know this, but they're just afraid to admit it and ask for help? Just because if you think about, I'm a Bears fan, by the way, so it resonates with me when we're talking about Caleb Williams. But we year after year, we see these quarterbacks, especially quarterbacks, drafted number one or in the top 3 every single year. They're the franchise player now, and they're 22 years old. And typically these high draft picks are, for the most part, were All-Americans in college, or they were, Mr. whatever of state. So it's kind of like they've been the big man on campus for a long time. But yeah, do you think that's an issue that's not talked about enough, is maybe the ego getting in the way of asking for help?
Yeah. I mean, no question. And again, I don't want to just say it's this era versus any other era. You and me, we're both men. One of the hardest things to do is to admit that you're wrong or admit that you don't know something and you need help in a particular area. And then when the expectations are high on you and you know what people expect of you, it's even harder to say, well, I can't meet your expectation because I don't really know this or I don't understand that. Humility is a hard thing, especially when you've had a great level of success, right? It's always tough when you've been at the top and been one of the best, to admit that you don't have the tools to be the best, at the next level or where you're at right now. I think that's always a hard thing. And I think that's always a wrestling match as well, because we want to project that we've got the answers and that we know and that we're ready and that, nobody has to worry about us, and it's part of, leadership, both sides of it is, the first is to be able to instill that confidence in your group that, hey, I got this, I can lead us. But I think it's always important in leadership also to go, hey, but I don't know everything. So, where I have a shortcoming, I need you guys to help me out. I need you guys to fill in the gaps. And, that can make a better leader as well when you humble yourself and you take accountability. But it's just a hard thing for all of us to do. And I just think that the higher the level of success you have, the harder it is in a lot of situations to admit that you don't have the answers, because the higher and more successful you are, the more you're expected to already have the answer. Well, you've been this good, you must have answers. You must know everything. And so when somebody looks at you that way and you go, I don't, it can be a scary proposition to look somebody in the face and do that. Again, I just think it's all, if at the end of the day, you're trying to become the best version of yourself, you have to understand what you don't know, right? You've got to figure it out. I often use that phrase, that old adage, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And I truly believe there's a lot of us that are like that, and again, I'll use this Caleb Williams situation, even though there may not be any accuracy in what I'm saying, but Caleb, it could be very easy for a Caleb Williams to go, my gosh, yeah, I know how to prepare. Like, I've been doing this my whole life. Like, won a Heisman Trophy. I'm one of the best players in college football. Everywhere I've been successful. Yeah, I'm good. I know what I'm doing.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden you find yourself in a situation and you pop on the film and you're watching film just like you did in college. And you're like, hey, this must be good enough because it was good enough in college. And they don't know, and they may not know it's not good enough. What they're doing and how they're preparing and what they're watching doesn't correlate the same way at the NFL level that it did at college. But until they know that, they're not going to do anything different, right? They're not going to look to do any different. They're not going to think they have to do anything different. And so being able to recognize what we don't know, to figure out and know what we don't know, I think oftentimes is the first step to that humility, is to be able to recognize, oh my gosh, I'm going to sit down with this veteran and my gosh, look what he's doing. And look what else he's doing. And look at how he's, oh my gosh, I never even thought of that stuff. Like, that wasn't even, on my radar. I would have never in a million years done that had I not seen this person. But we've got to seek out those things that we don't know, or those things that we can't do, or those things that, that we need to know if we're going to be the best version of ourselves. And so, we can't get stuck in the, I don't know what I don't know. We've got to seek out and make sure I know everything I can possibly know, because that's the only thing that gives me the chance to be the best.
Man, I love that. And it makes me think that I probably watched your Hall of Fame speech about 15 times over the past week. And actually, like, going back, that's a good point too. Like learning to be a pro, because even when you're in Green Bay, people think, oh, he's competing for fourth string. Well, the starter was Brett Favre, who played in like 5,000 straight games or whatever.
Yeah.
And then the backup is Ty Detmer, and people sleep on Ty Detmer. They don't realize how good he was, especially coming out of college, and right. Mm-hmm. And then Mark Brunell, who went on to be a starter, very successful in the NFL. But again, like you talked about, just humility and searching for answers and having that confidence. In your speech, you spoke about the power of faith during your journey. How did your faith shape your mindset during the toughest points and like stocking shelves at a grocery store before making it to the NFL?
Yeah, I mean, different versions of that faith. I mean, faith in, my Lord and Savior, so understanding that he had a purpose for me, in life. And so I think that's where it started, is chasing after that purpose and, trying to live my life in such a way that reflected that purpose. And so I think faith helped to direct me there in terms of character and work and belief in, in that bigger picture. I think there was personal faith, that I was always very confident. I was always, always believed in myself. There was never a time where I doubted if I had the skills and the ability, to play in the NFL and to be great at this. I walked very much in confidence and faith and belief in who I was. But then, I coupled those two things together in terms of, I would read oftentimes in the Bible about, different prophets and different individuals that God used and how they had to go through training grounds. They had to, Elijah, we named one of our kids after Elijah, and Elijah had the time where, he was kind of out on his own with the raven and, and trying to figure out, okay, what's God trying to teach me in this time so I'm ready for when he calls me. One of my favorite stories that I share all the time is the story of David and Goliath. And, everybody I think can, normally go, oh, yeah, that kind of makes sense with Kirk and kind of the underdog and facing these big odds and all that. But my favorite scene or sequence in that story is when David is talking to King Saul, and King Saul is kind of looking at this little shepherd boy. And he's trying to give him his armor because he's like, he can't go out against this giant without armor on. And this armor is way too big for him and he's stumbling around. And, King Saul is like, okay, dude, why do you think that you can defeat this giant? Like, I've got trained soldiers here. You're coming off the shepherd field and you think you can defeat. Why? Tell me, where's this faith come from that you can defeat this giant? And, he mentioned, I've got a big God and I believe in this big God. But he also said, but here's what makes me believe that I can defeat this giant is that, when you guys have been out here, going back and forth with Goliath, I've been, raising my flock. And I've been out in the field by myself with my flock for years. And every time my flock was threatened, whether it was a bear or a lion or whatever it was, a wolf, every time I defended my flock from those different threats. And so every time one comes, I believe, okay, it's going to be like the last time. I am going to defend my flock from whatever threat is out there. And so when he got to this battlefield, he's like, okay, my flock is the people of Israel, and here's the giant, here's the threat. So just like every other time, my experience is this. God has, taken me through all of this and prepared me for this moment through all the things I was doing out on my shepherd field. That's why I believe I'm going to go out there and defeat this giant. And so when I was going through my journey, I looked at it very much the same way, whereas everybody else was looking at me kind of like King Saul, like, okay, dude, why do you think you can be successful? You sat on the bench for 4 years in college. You got cut by the Green Bay Packers. You worked in a grocery store. All you've ever done at the pro level is play arena football and in Europe. Why do you think you can be successful? And in my mind, all I could think is, well, I played 1 year in college, and that 1 year I was the player of the year in our conference. I played 3 years in arena football, and I was voted the best quarterback in the league those 3 years, and I went to the championship 2 out of 3 years. Yeah. I played 1 year in Europe, and I was statistically the best quarterback in Europe. So all I looked at was when a ball was in my hands and I was between the lines, I was always successful. And so here we are. It's a bigger giant. There's Goliath. There's the NFL. Here's all the odds. You're looking at the wrong things, dude. Like, you're looking at the fact that this armor doesn't fit me. Like, I don't fit the mold for guys that come into the NFL and succeed. But that's not what I'm looking at. I'm looking at what I know about me and what I know about my journey. And I have faith in those two things and what's got me to this point, that this will sustain me moving forward. So when I got the ball in my hands, I believed I was going to be successful. I believed I was going to take down Goliath when everybody else just looked and said, "This is crazy. It's over. Like, they're going down with this guy." And so I think, perspective and where you come from and your experiences and what God's brought you through. And so that to me is where my faith, and again, I don't know if I would ever been. I mean, we talked about 1994 in Green Bay and where, I was worried about failure. When I got back in 1999, 98, 99, I was not afraid of failure. I was ready to go. Like, I knew who I was. I knew how good I was. Put the ball in my hands, please. Give me opportunities, because then I'm going to show you who I am and what I'm capable of. So my mindset completely changed, but I needed that training ground to really be able to hone and drill down on that faith and what I believed and who I was and whose I was, so to speak, that I walked into this next situation with the Rams and I was a completely different individual, just in overall confidence, overall skill set, who I was as a man of faith, what I believed my call and purpose in life was, and that it was much bigger than just playing good football. And so that training ground really helped to hone all of those things. So I felt like I was a much more complete player and person when I got back in 98 and 99, that I could handle anything that was going to be left on my plate. And I believe that went a long way in determining how good I was going to be.
I just have this image of you fighting Goliath or ready to meet him, but you're you're wearing football gear, and it's all the mismatched pads from the arena football.
There you go.
Days, the different
propellers on my pants and the goggles on my helmet, right? Yeah. Walk into an NFL stadium with all that stuff and people looking at you like, what is this joker? What is he doing?
It's funny, like we talked about, we don't realize what God, what we're being set up for in the future. Because if the NFL shifted around that time in terms of really because of the Rams, but in terms of the style of play, it started to become more of a passing league, right? And if you think about it, the Arena Football League, it was kind of made you ready for that with the
right.
smaller field or whatever and quicker pace.
Right.
I do want to,
again, you talked about training ground.
Yeah.
Playing arena football. I didn't want to play arena football. I told arena football no numerous times because I thought I was too good for arena football. And then arena football, I think, shaped so much of who I was. I don't know if I didn't have the skills before, but there's no doubt that, arena football honed, the ability to think quick, process fast, be accurate with the football, make quick decisions, all of those things that would become a part of who I was as a player and how I was remembered as a player were all the things that were honed playing arena football.
Yeah.
And you talked about the Rams, how we ushered in a completely new brand of football. What the NFL is nowadays, that nobody believed you could have success just throwing the football. And it was funny when we were coming in 99 and we were scoring all these points and we were setting all these records, and you got guys coming over from the other sideline like, oh my gosh, you guys are like a video game. It's unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it. And I'm going into the locker room after games going, okay, why did we punt 3 times? Like, what's the problem here? Why are we punting the football? And so my mindset from arena football was so different than what everybody else's mindset was. In the NFL, it was like, hey, if we can score 4 times, in 10, 12 possessions, that's a good game. And if I scored 4 times in 12 possessions in arena football, I got blown out of the stadium. Yeah. So there were just so many different things that you never think about when you're going through the journey, that when you get there or when you're past it and you can look back and you go, gosh, how important was that to me? How important was arena football and that perspective and that mindset and the way that I played and the things that I learned to allow me to have the success? Yeah, there's times I wish I would have got 6 or 7 more years in the NFL and got to play. And what would that have done for my legacy? And where would I have stacked up, in the history of the game if you gave me 6 more years to play, all that stuff. But the other side of it is, well, if you gave me 6 more years and I wasn't the same guy I was in 99, maybe I'm not nearly as good of a player and have nearly as good of a career because I hadn't become the guy that I was. And so I think it's so important to just look back and see and understand and have perspective and be grateful for the things that we go through that shape us and make us who we ultimately become.
On that, you've given it in that same Hall of Fame speech, you gave a lot of credit to family, coaches, and teammates. Can you share a specific moment when someone's belief in you made a pivotal difference in your career?
Oh man. Yeah. I mean, a big part of my Hall of Fame speech was, a lot of guys will get up there and just kind of go, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, because there's so many people to thank. And what I wanted to do in my speech was share stories about each of the people along the way that shaped my journey, and to be able to share those poignant moments that really meant something to me so they could hear from me like, hey, this will never be forgotten. And the reason I'm standing up here is because of this. So, I mean, there's so many different things that I could share. Let me just share one about that I did share in my Hall of Fame speech about Al Luginbill. And so Al Luginbill would be my coach in NFL Europe. And so this was in 1996. He called me and said, hey, I know some people in Arena League and, rave reviews about you, and I've watched you play, and I think you would be great for us in Amsterdam playing in NFL Europe. And I knew that if I was going to get back to the NFL, I was probably going to have to play on the big field again and go to NFL Europe and do that. But I told him in 96, I said, okay, here's the deal. I'm making a pretty good living for myself. This has been really good. I can able to take care of my family and play this game that I love. And I'm just not willing to give that up unless I know for sure I'm going to get another chance with an NFL team. So if you can get an NFL team to try me out and sign me, where I know I'm going to get to training camp with them and just have another shot to compete, then I will come play for you. And he goes, okay, all right, deal. So he went and did his due diligence and called everybody he knew around the league. And he called me back a couple of weeks later, and he's like, okay, Kurt, we would love to have you play for us, but nobody in the NFL is interested. And I'm like, Al, I would love to come over and do this, but if it means me having to give up what I have here and I lose this, I'm going to have to pass. And so, we hung up the phone, and I thought, I'm never going to hear from him again. And then, ironically enough, he called me back a year later and gave me the same spiel and asked me if I would come play for him. And I gave him the same spiel. I'm like, Al, I'm even in a better place now than I was a year ago. But if you can get me signed with an NFL team, I will come play for you. And so he went back. And again, as the story goes, he called 12 different NFL teams and nobody was interested. He actually had an office in the St. Louis Rams building because, at that time, certain teams could allocate players to NFL Europe. So his team was one of the Rams team was his team. And so they would allocate teams to him. And so he had an office there at Rams Park. And so to this day, different people will share different stories with you. But I know, at least I'm pretty confident, that Al basically went to the Rams and Coach Vermeil and just said, hey, do me a favor and bring this guy in and sign him. And he can be your fourth quarterback in camp. But if you sign him, he'll come play for me in Europe. And, and I'll get what I want and he'll get what he wants.
Yeah.
And, and we'll just see. And so I believe as a favor to them, because I went in and they brought me in for a tryout. I had the worst tryout of my life. I had broken my thumb at the end of the Arena League the year before. And so I couldn't really control the football the way that I wanted to. And I always, that was always my greatest strength was my accuracy. And I didn't feel like I was on the top of my game. And so I remember leaving. I wasn't even out of Rams Park yet. And I called my wife and I'm like, I blew my last opportunity. Terrible, terrible tryout. I blew it. And of course they called me a few days later. And again, this is why all of this stuff leads me to believe that as a favor to Al, they're like, hey, we like what we saw. We want to sign you to a contract and bring you to training camp. And I'm like, okay, done deal. I'm in. And so, thanks to his persistence and what he saw in me, and even if it was as a favor, like sometimes I don't care why I got into Rams camp. I didn't care what they were doing. The bottom line to me was, hey, they can do this for whatever reasons they want. But if they're bringing me in, they're going to get a chance to see me because I'm going to show them what I'm all about. But it was thanks to Al's persistence. And even after being told no, that he didn't give up and he gave me another shot. And it would be that shot that would ultimately lead me back to the NFL and, and onto the career that I had. And so, so many people along the way in the journey that gave me chances like that and gave me opportunities and were willing to be persistent or be patient with me. And without those people, I'm not where I am today. I wouldn't have had the career that I had. And so, that was so much what my speech was all about, was being able to recognize them while in the midst of that sharing stories with people. The ultimate theme, as if you listen to it, was about moments, and life is about moments and what we do with the moments we've been given. And that could be either side. That could be Al's side. He had a moment and, what he did with that moment, the persistence to say, hey, I like this guy. This guy deserves an opportunity and to stick with it. And then, for me, when I got those moments and when I went to Europe and to be able to play and seize those opportunities, but life is about those moments on both sides, giving people opportunities and having patience. And what do you do when somebody does give you an opportunity? And so my speech was very much kind of layered with those different moments that shaped who I was, some moments that other people took advantage of, some moments that I took advantage of.
That ties into, in your speech, you talked about the importance of uncovering value in being my someone. As a follow-up to that, how do you, like in a business dominated by head decisions, how do you instill the importance of following the heart?
Yeah, I mean, I think both things always play into life, right? My head wants me to do this, my heart wants me to do that. And I think it's important to weigh all of those factors. I don't think it's always, hey, you always got to vote with your head. Oh, you always must choose with your heart. Because emotions can sometimes get in the way of us making good decisions. So I think all of it has to play in. It's like analytics now, right? I mean, the analytics say, do this. Well, I think sometimes you've got to understand the momentum in a game and what's going on. You got to understand your players and you got to go, okay, then analytics say this, and I might most of the time do this. But right now, I got to go this direction. And so I think both are extremely important. And we've got to make sure that we arm ourselves and we think about the situations. And, there are going to be different times where I think it's important to listen to your heart and other times where I think it's just smart to listen to your head. And, I guess ultimately we never really know if it was the right decision or not. But I think both are important. I think we're thinking individuals, but we're also feeling individuals. And I don't think we can neglect either side of that and just run off in one direction. I think like everything, you take in as much information as you can from as many different ways as you possibly can. And then ultimately, you take all of that information and say, okay, what do I feel is the best situation or the best decision in this situation? And then we make it. But I think both are vital. And I think if we push ourselves too much in one direction or another, we're going to miss some critical factors and experiences in life that none of us want to miss.
What are some less obvious reasons you achieve success in the NFL?
Some less obvious reasons. That's a good question. Some less obvious reasons. I think one thing I would say is that I was really smart and processed information well, where I don't think a lot of people always think of, great athletes as being smart guys. They think of, okay, it first starts with the physical ability, but then, to me, I think it was the opposite, that I was really good at processing information. And, I don't know if I am a genius or really smart, or you could give me a test or an IQ test and I would blow it out of the water. I don't know. But in the area of football, I was very, very smart. I could see and process information really, really quickly. And so I think that was one of the reasons. And, so you say less obvious. I'll just kind of give you an example that maybe fits what you're asking. So in the off season, really throughout my life, but specifically when I got to the NFL, I rarely picked up a football. And so this is why I say it's less obvious, because most people would think, okay, this guy was one of the most accurate throwers in NFL history. I'm sure his offseason was filled with him getting a football and taking drops and making different throws and working on his technique and all of that stuff. And I rarely did that. One thing is I knew I had really good technique. I knew how to throw a football. Throwing more footballs against air was not going to make me better. But as I just said, what I thought separated me was my ability to process, my ability to think in chaos and see different things in chaos. So my off seasons were filled with competitive things that I could do. Like, again, you never get to do 7-on-7 every day in the off season. I can't get bodies out there to read and make decisions. And so for me, it was like, how do I put myself in as many situations as possible where I have to think and see and assess and process? So I played a lot of basketball. I played a lot of racquetball. I did different things like that. A lot of like games where I had to think fast and react and see bodies and assess different things. And so that's why I say a less obvious thing is that most people probably wouldn't think that. Like, okay, maybe you play basketball so you could get in good shape and work your feet. I was actually doing those things for my mind and for processing. And so I could see and feel, and the spatial awareness and the understanding of what I needed, just in terms of feeling it and moving in the pocket and doing all of that stuff. And so my off-season routine became more about, okay, how do I do things that are all about processing and thinking fast, not about moving fast and throwing fast. It was the other thing. And so I think that's an example of maybe a less obvious thing that I was doing. And I was thinking, every time I went into an off season, if I'm going to get better, I need to get better in this area. I need to process better. I need to feel things. I need to see it. I need to assess situations and be able to handle all of that chaos the best I possibly could. And the physical part of it was way, way down on the list in terms of the most important things for me to be successful.
I feel like that's where arena football kind of plays into, where everything was so quick. Another great answer you could have said, just in case someone else ever asks this question again in the future, if you really want to mess with people, we could say I played lots and lots of Madden, just nonstop. I would stay up till 2. No, I'm joking.
Yeah, Madden wasn't my thing, but I will say that I did play a lot of thinking games.
Yeah,
something like just I don't even know, but just
like Trivial Pursuit or something, or just like
just thinking, or even just if it was like a puzzle game on my my computer or my phone, something where you just had to see and react, and how quickly can you do that? Like you see all those things now.
That's a great point.
The higher level, like there's a bunch of lights and it's like react and hit the lights. I guess the games that I was playing were kind of like that, where it was see and react, try to anticipate, do that sort of thing. So although I wasn't playing Madden, I was doing a lot of things like that, playing different games or challenging myself mentally as much as I possibly could, as kind of my way, even in downtime when I'm sitting on the couch, to continue to hone my mental skills.
No, I love it. I play Clue with my daughter a lot, and it's just to get some critical thinking.
Yeah.
I want to transition to some much lighter topics and just do some asking miscellaneous questions. There's no rhyme and reason. These are meant to be fun. They're going to be kind of
Okay.
all over the place though, but so you can. I want you to quickly process all this stuff. No.
Okay.
All
Yeah.
right. What's something you're doing now you wish you would have done more of 10 years ago?
That's a great question. I would just say, kind of advancing, my thought process in terms of different endeavors. When I was playing football, it was all football. And I wish I would have dabbled in some different things. Like you see so many of these guys, podcasts and creating different, platforms and doing different things. I'm trying to engage a lot more in that now where, I wish I would have done it 10 years ago. It would have been cool to see where the platform was now had I started a decade ago.
No, that's great. I appreciate that answer. I want to do a name game. I'm just going to say some names, just one or two words to describe the person. Al Luganville was going to be one, but you already talked about that story. Coach Padlock.
Coach Padlock. Persistent.
Okay.
Persistent.
Larry Fitzgerald.
Man, Larry.
Worst wide receiver of all time. I'm joking. No, I'm joking.
No. I'm going to say controlled. The way that he controlled his body was, like nothing I've ever seen before.
Yeah, phenomenal. Rich Eisen.
Man, master of, of all trades. Like anything he does, he prospers. He's good at it. I mean, he manages he's just the master of everything. Our show, like he just pulls it all together and gets the best out of everybody. He's so good at managing and mastering every little piece.
He's a quarterback like in his own right when you think about
no doubt. Yeah. He's definitely the quarterback of our show, of his show. Yeah. He's phenomenal. So smart, witty, quick, just so good.
Dick Vermeil.
If I'm using, led by his heart. We're talking about heart decisions and head decisions. His emotions and his ability to be in touch with people and connect with people. Yeah, I'd probably say that. I'd probably use the word connect. He connects better with people than anybody I've ever known.
That's a great point because I remember the press conference when Trent Green tore his knee or whatever, and you could feel the emotion. Going back to the earlier question, like on with like leading with your heart or instilling, following your heart. Do you think there's anything about you that reminded Dick Vermeil of Vince Papale?
I mean, I'm sure to some degree. I mean, Dick, it's crazy to think that, 2 movies have been made about players of his that kind of came from nowhere, that he gave opportunities and then went on to do great things. And, even though we've only got, we're 2 of the guys that made movies, I know there's been other guys as well. And so, I've talked to Dick about this before, and, I think he felt very much like as he started his journey and became a head coach, that he was kind of in that same mold, kind of came from different places and wasn't necessarily given, all the opportunities and had to work his way up and needed some people to give him an opportunity so he could ultimately become a Hall of Fame coach. That I think he saw himself in both Vince and me, more than just, me and Vince or Vince and me.
Yeah.
He saw himself in both of us and wanted to give us opportunities because he knew somebody had done it for him. And I just think that was the way he was wired, is that, sometimes it doesn't always look or come from the same place that a lot of success comes from, but that doesn't mean there's not greatness in there. And he had the ability where his head was probably telling him numerous times, don't do this. Don't give that guy that. Why his heart, he would lead with his heart going, hey, but there's something about not taking the conventional route and something about the heart that these people have to chase what they do and to have the patience and persistence and, the will to keep going when everybody else says, stop. There's something powerful there. And I think he always had a great connection to that.
If you were to cast Rich Eisen, or if a movie was made about Rich Eisen, who would you cast as the lead actor, or who would you
Oh my
cast as to
gosh.
play Rich Eisen? And for
Holy
you, it's
cow.
got to feel
You're
pretty
putting
good the fact that
you put me
Zachary
on a
Levi.
spot.
Yeah, I mean, I
You
have
put
a
me
recommendation, and I hope Rich Eisen
okay.
sees this. Clearly, I was going to say Ryan Gosling would play Rich Eisen. I think there's a
Wow.
yeah.
Okay. I
I
think
think
Rich would go for that. He's got way
it's
too much hair for Rich.
I would say yeah. Glenn Powell or Ryan Gosling. Those are like when I think of
Wow, look
those.
at you.
Yeah, I mean, those are
Goodness
guys.
gracious.
It's uncanny. I mean, and Rich Eisen, if you're seeing that,
Yeah.
I think that's
I was thinking, you know, and again, not based on looks at all. Right, because I wasn't thinking of that perspective of
The
things.
Rock.
But yeah, no, I'm thinking about people that just like can play different roles. Like a Paul Giamatti type guy that
Yeah,
just, that you can see
that's
him in
good.
so many
That's
different
good.
roles. Yeah, I wasn't thinking about like the guys you're thinking about, these good looking hunks. I'm thinking about the guys that are multifaceted in terms of their acting. And, you could see them in all these different shows. And again, I'm not a huge Hollywood guy, so I wish I had more, but
I got one.
I know him when I see him, but it's like, man, this guy could play any role that you ask him to play. He could be the lead. He could be the secondary guy. He can be managing everything from behind. So he's really the star, but he makes everybody else look like the star. Like that's the kind of actor that you need to play Rich Eisen, because he can be all of those different things.
Obviously, looks wise, Glenn Powell, Ryan Gosling,
Yeah.
Stanley Tucci, I could see playing Rich Eisen. I could
Okay.
see, yeah. But
Yeah.
Paul Giamatti's a
Right.
great one too.
And then they've got that inner, as well. It's not necessarily exuded, but that inner confidence and intelligence to them, that just distinguished, feel that comes from them, when they stand up there. They don't have to project it with their looks, but they just, oh yeah. I mean, again, I would have to come back in a week and I could probably give you 7 or 8 guys that I think would be phenomenal for Rich. But those are the kind of things I think of as multifaceted guys.
That's a great. We'll have to do a poll or something on social media, like which actors.
Right.
Who's your favorite fictional quarterback of all time?
Fictional quarterback. Wow, I don't know if I've ever been asked that. Fictional quarterback. You're stumping me here. I gotta think of some of these guys. I don't even know the guy's name, but when I was growing up, I used to love the show. Warren Beatty, I think, played in Heaven Can Wait, about a Rams quarterback back in the day, and I don't even remember to this day what the quarterback's name was in the show. But that was one of my favorite shows growing up. So it was ironic that that I would ultimately become a Rams quarterback. But I don't know the name, and so it's just the first one that came to my mind because I grew up watching that. I don't know. That's a good question.
Thank you.
Who do you got?
Uncle Rico, I think, is the obvious choice. I think he's the GOAT. I mean, he's the reason why you're not my favorite quarterback. I mean, you're great. You had a great career, but man, you don't have that Uncle Rico arm strength. So no one does. Yeah.
I'm trying to think back to the football movies, like remember the Titans, but that wasn't necessarily like a memorable quarterback,
I looked up
Friday Night Lights.
I looked up some last night. I was thinking if I didn't do Paul Crewe, I was going to say Shane Falco. That was Keanu Reeves.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah.
Shane Falco. What was that? The Untouchable?
The Replacements, maybe?
Or Replacements.
Yeah.
There you go.
But then
okay. I could see that. Look, Keanu Reeves. Okay.
Yeah. Or
I could go there.
Point Break is one of my favorite movies of all time, and of course Johnny Utah.
Keanu again, of course. Yeah.
Regarding real quarterbacks, past or present, if you could combine 3 quarterbacks into one super quarterback, who would you choose?
3 quarterbacks into one super quarterback. Okay. I'm going to exclude myself.
Yeah, sorry. Good call. Yeah.
I'm going to exclude myself. So I'm going to put Drew Brees, because I always believe that we were the 2 most accurate quarterbacks in NFL history. So I'm going to take Drew's accuracy. I'm going to take Tom Brady's acumen, and big play gene.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to take those 2 guys, and then I'll take Patrick's physical ability, just his ability to throw from different platforms, his great. I'll take his feel too. his feel for the game on when to run and when to throw, and just that unique sense of athleticism that he has. Gosh, I mean, but there's so many. I mean, Lamar and Josh. I mean, I think about their skill sets and stuff. But I'll go with those three guys for those three reasons.
No, that's great. I love the Drew Brees. Again, he's another one of my favorites, but the accuracy and that's pretty good. Those are pretty good.
Yeah,
Patrick Mahomes
he's
does some
awesome.
throws. I'm like, how the hell did he do that, man? And he makes
Amazing.
it look easy. It looks like he's just playing
Amazing.
on the playground, and it's like, oh, I could do that. Then it turns out we can't,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
he does make it look easy. What do you hope people say about you? None of us are immortal, right? We're all going to leave this earth at some point. But what do you hope people say
Yeah.
about you when you're gone?
What I really hope they say is that when it's all said and done, that football is rarely talked about. That what I hope is that they talk about the person that I was, the way that I carried myself, the way that I led people, the way that I loved people, the way that I represented, who I wanted to be, but more importantly, my faith and who God wants me to be. I hope that's what they say. I just hope, when they're talking about me and, my memorial service or whatever, that football is rarely mentioned, with in regards to the impact that I had on people.
What do you think? What is something you think people would be surprised to learn about you?
I don't know. I mean, I would say one thing, because I'm very emotional, and so I don't know how often that's really, shown up wherever, whether that's me doing TV and media, whether that was me on the field. But I'm a very emotional guy, and that can be, crying at a commercial. That can be anytime I'm talking about my kids, tears coming down my face, or that could be me playing pickup basketball and screaming and hollering and making a lot of noise or getting fired up. That fire inside of me and that emotional side was something that I always kind of tried to curtail when I was playing quarterback because I felt it was needed. But it's something that comes out all the time in real life. And I think it would surprise people if you told them, hey, he gets fired up and he'll holler and scream or he'll cry at the drop of a hat. I'm not sure a lot of people would know and expect that from me.
Oh, that's awesome. The last couple questions, just as we're wrapping up. If there was a giant billboard with your picture on it for the world to see, and everyone had to read it, where would you want your billboard to be? And what would you want your billboard to say?
Great question. I mean, the first place when you said where it would be, if it had to be like in a specific, location on Earth, I guess I would want it to be in Times Square, where all the lights and millions of people are walking every single day and 24 hours a day, on one of those buildings represented. What would I want it to say? I was lucky to do the Got Milk campaign years ago in my first Super Bowl. And so I think it would say like one of two things, like got Jesus or got love. It's one of those two things that I want people to know me for the way that I love people and, in every way, shape or form, every facet, every corner of life, no matter what it was, whatever religion, whatever race, I want people to remember me for just loving people for who they are and how God created them. So, on the spot, thinking about it quickly, it would be something like that.
Last question is, what is one piece of wisdom you would pass on to the next generation of people to help them light their own torch and carry it forward?
Okay, the piece of wisdom I would give them was probably the greatest lesson I'd learned through my journey. And it came in college when I was sitting on the bench for 4 years. And I had a friend go up and ask the coaches on my behalf why I wasn't playing because I felt I was the most talented guy in the room and blah, blah, blah. And I'll never forget, he came back down and the coaches told him the reason I wasn't playing was because I was not very good in practice. And I felt very much like Allen Iverson. Like practice, like we're talking about practice, like not a game, not a Super Bowl, not the playoffs. We're talking about practice, and so that's kind of what was going through my mind when that was said. And I left, and I was kind of like, "What a dumb excuse that is," blah blah blah. And over the course of the next couple of days, I started thinking about life, and specifically from a football perspective. And I got to thinking, like, okay, man, in college we played 12 games in 365 days. In the NFL, we play 16 games in 365 days. And so what I was starting to realize was, 95% of our lives are lived in practice. And the biggest impression we make on people, the way people can understand and really realize who we are, is what we do every day in practice. And that's what the coaches were saying, is that we can't really trust you with the ball in your hands on Saturday afternoon because we don't know who you're going to be from day to day. Like, we don't see it. One day you might be great, the next day you might be awful, but we don't know. And so because you don't show up consistently in practice the same way, we don't know who you are, and so we can't trust you in that situation. And that just started getting the wheels turning. And you can reflect back and look at me and my wife, and we've been married for 28 years. And I thought when I got married to my wife that she wanted me to make sure I hit the big moments. Don't forget her birthdays. We need really good anniversary gifts. Make sure that you're setting her up with all those big moments right. And I've realized over 28 years, my wife loves those things, but she just wants to know who I'm going to be in practice. How are you going to show up every day? How are you going to love me every day? Whether it's good or bad, how are you going to feel towards me? Whether I've had a good day, bad day, whether we're arguing or whether we're in a great, what kind of practice player are you going to be? And then I can continue to extend that. I've got 7 kids, and I thought the same thing. Okay, don't miss their games. Be there for the father-daughter dances. Okay, when it's time to give that big lecture, you got to nail that big lecture. And I've realized the same thing. My kids just want to know, Dad, who are you going to be every day? How are you going to love me every day? Whether I got an A or whether I got an F, whether I had a great game or whether I was awful. How are you going to love your mom? How are you going to love our mom every day? What kind of father are you going to be every day? How are you going to go to work every day? What is the reflection that we can gain from you that this is who our dad is?
Yeah.
Every day, this is what we see. Every day, this is what we expect. And so I think the greatest piece of advice I would give people is, what kind of practice player are you? That's, to me, something that I ask myself every day is like, what kind of practice player are you? How are you going to show up today no matter what's on the agenda? Are you going to be the same guy? Are you going to treat people the same way? Are you going to go about your business the exact same way on a daily basis so people can come to expect something when they say, who is Kurt Warner? Kind of back to the legacy. This is who he is. We saw this every single day. We know that's what defines him.
That is perfect. I want to end on that, Kurt. Is there any I'm so inspired. I can't wait to clip that and share that with people. Man, that is so profound. Thank you for sharing that. That is the perfect answer. Do you have any parting thoughts, anything that you want to share or publicize or put out there, promote?
I mean, I got plenty of things, but this doesn't need to be the place or the time. I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate your service and all the service of all the men and women out there like yourself doing this on a normal basis for all of us. And I love that you're using your platform to spread positive messages and impact people. I think we're in a special place in time where we get all these opportunities to be able to impact the lives of other people. And a lot of people choose a lot of different ways to do it. But I love that you're doing it in a positive way. And I appreciate you having me on and letting me be a small part of it.
Kurt, thank you so much. This is a big moment for me. So again, I'm just humbled and honored, and thank you so much.